Okay, so we are going to start rolling. Welcome, everyone. My name is Mary Burley. I'm the Chief Educator at the Norman Rockwell Museum, and we are so happy you are here with us tonight for Finding Funny, Cartoonists, and the Picturebook. I'm here today with Stephanie Plunkett, who is the Deputy Director and Chief Curator at the museum, and 4 celebrated illustrators who have very broad range of work among them, but also do incredible children's books. We are with Elwood Smith, Roxie Munro, Marc Rosenthal, and Liza Donnelly. Behind the scenes, Rich Broadway and Alyssa Stubel of the Norman Rockwell Museum will be managing some of your questions and working to keep the program rolling. We invite all of you to enter questions into the question and answer and chat boxes. And where we can, we will elevate people to ask questions personally. YouTube viewers, we also welcome you to put questions into the YouTube chat box, and we will bring them to the meeting. We are recording this event, and we will use it for school programs and other things in the future. Additionally, we will post it on our YouTube channel. So with that, we just are, again, just so happy you're here and excited to explore how these wonderful illustrators have fit creating books for children into their remarkable bodies of work. And with that, Stephanie Plunkett will introduce each of the artists.
It is a great pleasure to introduce these amazing artists, and I'm going to tell you just a little bit about each one. Hopefully you'll all be able to see the images as I do that. Liza Donnelly begins her day by checking major news outlets like CBS, CNN, NPR, and Twitter, and she later creates and shares digital drawings inspired by the day's most pressing events, and you can catch that at 5 p.m. each day. Her cartoons have been featured in The New Yorker, where she has been a staff artist since 1979, on CBS News, NBC, CNN, and in Forbes, Ms., The New York Times, Fusion, Medium, Narrative, Politico, The Daily Beast, The Huffington Post, and many others. Liza has given a TED Talk, and she has spoken at the United Nations on behalf of Cartooning for Peace, an organization that invites cartoonists to open the dialogue about democracy and freedom. A self-described feminist, Liza is the author of Funny Ladies, The New Yorker's greatest women cartoonists, Cartoon Marriage, created with her husband and fellow cartoonist Michael Maslin, and Women on Men and other cartoon collections. Dinosaur Day, Dinosaur Garden, The End of the Rainbow, and A Hippo in Our Yard are among her colorful children's picture books, and her work is currently on view at the Norman Rockwell Museum and will be here until September 27th if you're able to make it over. Marc Rosenthal's inventive graphic illustrations appear regularly in such national publications as Time, Rolling Stone, The Atlantic, Forbes, Fortune, the New York Times, and the Boston Globe. In addition, he is a New York Times best-selling illustrator of many books for children, including the BOGO series written by his wife Eileen Rosenthal, who I think is on tonight, Small Walt, The Runaway Beard, Where on Earth, A Geography Guide to the Globe, The Straight Line Wonder, and Phooey, which he wrote himself. Marc is also the creator of 2U, a national traveling exhibition produced in collaboration with the Smithsonian Institution and the National Geographic Society. Published in 2016, A Child's First Book of Trump, which Marc illustrated, is up for discussion tonight. Roxie Munro is the author and illustrator of more than 40 nonfiction STEM and STEAM and concept books for children, many using gamification to encourage reading, learning, and engagement. These include Mazescapes, Amazement Park, the Inside Outside books, including New York City, Washington, D.C., Texas, London, and Paris. Feathers, Flaps, and Flops. Doors, Gargoyles, Gardens and Glass. Ranch, Maze, Circus, Mazeways, and this really sounds fun, and she's going to talk about it tonight, I think. Dive in, swim with sea creatures and their actual size, and many others. She's also created interactive children's book apps like Roxie's Maze, and has been commissioned by CBS, The Washington Post, and the Associated Press. 14 of her paintings have been published as covers of the New Yorker magazine. And of course, last but not least, the wonderful Elwood Smith, who is an acclaimed humorous illustrator, best known for his whimsical comic characters and intelligent, inventive drawings, which have appeared on the covers and pages of Forbes, Fortune, Time, Newsweek, Bloomberg, GQ, the Wall Street Journal, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, and many others. Sony, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Pizza Hut, AT&T, McDonald's, and Bell Atlantic are among his many clients. And Stalling, Hot Diggity Dog, See How They Run, The Truth About Poop, Raise the Roof, Bug Muldoon, and How to Draw with Your Funny Bone are just some of his illustrated books. Elwood has also explored the world of animation and creative 2 and 3D productions, and he is musically gifted. He has been playing guitar since the late 1950s and composing his own songs. His whimsical transfer drawings, which actually are created just for his own enjoyment, will also be shared during this presentation. I'll just mention that Elwood's World, some of you may remember this, Elwood's World was an exhibition that was presented at the Norman Rockwell Museum in 2011, and it was an enormous hit. And we are fortunate at the museum to hold what we like to call the world's largest collection of art and archival materials by Elwood Smith. So with that, I'll just mention that we will invite each artist to take us through a series of their own work. And we'll start with Liza Donnelly, but we invite your questions and comments throughout, and as they come in, we are very happy to pose them to the artists. So Liza, would you like to begin?
Sure, that's me. Next slide.
Yes, next slide, sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction. Thank you.
This is an example of my cartoons for the New Yorker. I've been working for them since 1979, and this one is one of the more popular cartoons that I've done for them. It's it just was reprinted and reshared even recently. So and I forget when it was drawn, but it was probably in the 90s. Anyway, it's a simple black and white. The New Yorker doesn't use much color, as everybody knows. They have had some color cartoons, and I've published a couple of color cartoons for them, but this is typical New Yorker style cartoon. And you can do the next slide, I guess. Here's another example. Fun can happen to adults too. This is one of my favorite cartoons of my own. I just like it because I like drawing these big trees. I think I was influenced by George Harriman, Crazy Cat, the way he draws his trees. I draw my trees like this. And I just like the idea. Swings, I draw a lot of swings. I like drawing cartoons that sort of cross over into childhood, and I like putting, using that metaphor to talk about life and how I think as cartoonists and illustrators, we have to remain childlike in a way. I don't know if you guys agree with me. Next slide.
Liza, I wonder if you want to read that caption just in case people can't.
This therapist was saying, so you're a Democrat and you won. How does that make you feel? This was done for the New Yorker back in when Obama won the first time, won for president, because we had such a string of Republicans in office that it was shocking to many Democrats. And I like to do political cartoons for the New Yorker. I've done a number over the years, and this is a typical New Yorker political cartoon back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Now they have an online political cartoon every day that is much less subtle. The work that I haven't had any online, but for them, but they have some really strong cartoons on their NewYorker.com that are much less polite. Let's put it that way. Than the ones typically in the magazine. So this one also, I like to point out that I made it 2 women just because I can. Do the next slide.
Okay.
This one obviously is very recent, and it was I started working digitally a lot on my iPad. I tried the Wacom tablet, which is another device for those of you that aren't in the art world. It's a digital device to draw on a screen, and but I really prefer drawing on the iPad, and I do a lot of my drawings on there now, although the New Yorker work is always on paper. And this was done when the coronavirus took off in March, and I just thought it's a global thing, and we all have to care for each other and put our arms out. So sometimes I try to do these simple visual drawings, and normally, I mean, nobody published this except Twitter and Medium. My blog platform is on medium.com, and I can publish whatever I want there. I get a little bit of money from that, but it's more like sharing my work and getting it out there. And this one was reprinted thousands of times, I think. Not reprinted is the wrong word. It's been shared thousands of times on Twitter. Different United Nations and different countries used it because it's obviously nonverbal, so it's an easy thing to.
And it also became really the logo for your exhibition, which I think
it's nice.
Made perfect sense. It's such an inclusive.
I've learned a lot about doing captionless. I mean, although I started my career doing captionless drawings without words, because that's what I liked to do for the New Yorker. But since my connection with lots of international cartoonists, I've learned from watching their work and studying their work, how powerful and rewarding it can be to do a visual idea like this without words, and it can travel around the world. And that I learned a lot from my friends and colleagues abroad. So, next one.
This was actually just shortly after 9/11. Is that right, Liza?
Yeah. I didn't think I could be a cartoonist anymore. I didn't know it was funny. A lot of people were examining their lives, and I was too. So but I drew this, and the New Yorker bought it and printed it a couple months after 9/11, and I felt like, okay, I'm back on track. So I did a lot more political cartoons after this.
And the sandbox is a format that you sometimes use with children who have kind of unending wisdom, it seems. It's great.
Yeah, they say things that they don't, they're so innocent, and I love putting words in children's mouths, in the sandbox particularly. The one on the left, I don't know if everybody can see the one on the left with the mom standing there. She says, we have no plan, Mom. We're occupying the sandbox. This was done, and the New Yorker didn't buy it, and nobody bought it. It was done during the Occupy Wall Street period, and I was just using the word occupy. That's often what cartoonists do. They take words and just put them in an unusual setting, and that's what makes it funny. And the one on the right is another one that I really like of mine, because it's talking about gender in a sort of guised way. Like, I don't see liking trucks as a boy thing. I see it as a liking trucks thing. And I think I was really influenced by Charles Schulz growing up. I read Peanuts daily in the Washington Post, and loved Peanuts. It was like Peanuts was my strip as a kid, and Snoopy in particular. But I just loved the way he used their voices to say something deeper sometimes. So I didn't make the connection when I drew this, but I think I was heavily influenced by Schulz.
And we just happened to have a letter that you wrote to Charles Schultz when you were a little girl on the wall at the museum, complete with Peanuts illustrations.
Fan letter to Charles Schultz, yeah.
So we kind of get into a little bit about your picture book, and I wonder if you want to say how you got involved in jumping from cartooning to picture book art.
Early in my career in the 80s, I started, people said you should do kids books, and I kept putting it off. I didn't really know, I didn't know how to do that. But I had an idea. So I made a dummy, which is a fake book on cheap paper, and you staple it on it. It's a dummy. It's a dummy book, and telling the story of a little boy and how he discovers under the snow repeatedly, and he's with his dog. And I found an agent. I met an agent at a party, and she liked the idea, so she took it around. And Scholastic liked it. They liked the idea, and they said, "Well, would you mind making your monsters into dinosaurs?" Because they knew how popular dinosaurs were. Took off right at the cusp of it. And I said, sure, because I actually worked at the Museum of Natural History when I was in New York, early days. And so I love dinosaurs. I love natural history. So I created these books for Scholastic. And they're all about this little boy and his dog and their fascination with, actually, the little boy is fascinated with dinosaurs, but the dog is not so sure. You can see that in his face on the left. The dog would rather stay home, but the boy keeps going out and like, let's go do this. And he knows everything about dinosaurs. And these books are for 5-6-year-olds, early readers, and they have very minimal words, very visual, which is what I had hoped to do, is make visual books that were less about the words.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can read. Was this published in Asia? Some of the text looks like it's I don't know what.
Oh.
From
where are you seeing that? The last one was, that was Dinosaur Speak.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry.
That's
I made up this language. No, I really did make. It's a fake language for the dinosaurs. In some of the books, the dinosaurs have that language, and it's just my scribbles.
We have a side note on this, though, Mark, which is that in the museum right now, one of these images is on the walls, and children have no problem translating language for their parents.
Great.
Yeah, when these came out, I was visiting schools all the time. I know Roxie's done that a lot, and I know probably you guys have too. But it's really fun to meet with the kids and talk to them about what you do. Oh, that's really fun. And these two are from a more recent book called Rainbow, End of the Rainbow. And this time, I decided to make a little girl and her cat in their adventure, looking for what's at the end of the rainbow. And what's I find this interesting or useful to know is that I did dummies of this book and the next book we're going to talk about. Back right after the dinosaur books finished, I did 7 of those dinosaur books. When they finished, I did these dummies, and my agent tried to sell them, but couldn't get anybody to buy them. And then 10, 12 years later, an editor at Holiday House approached me and said, we'd love to work with you. And so I showed her these old dummies, and she bought both. So never give up hope. Always keep trying.
That's a really great message. I think one of the things that's kind of fun in the exhibition is Liza actually handed me a folder full of rejection letters from the New Yorker. And I think maybe one thing you might talk about is how hard is that to, have ideas and not always find a place for them to go?
Well, I know all of us on this panel know what that's
Everybody's
like.
gone through
You
that.
have to do, well, with the New Yorker, we do 6 to 10 ideas a week. We, meaning all New Yorker cartoonists, and they might buy one. They might not buy any, and for weeks. So you're constantly producing material that never sees the day. But what do you get, really? That's usually the case. So rejection is just part of the mix. You know, you're always putting stuff out there, right, guys? You're just always producing ideas, and hopefully you find the right person that will want to buy it or use it.
If I might add to that, the How to Draw with Your Funny Bone book and another one called I'm Not a Pig in Underpants, both sat around forever, and occasionally we pitched them, and then everybody would say, no, love the art, it's not for us. And that went on for years, many years. And then one day, I don't know if any of you know Rita Marshall at the Creative Company, and they bought two of my books almost immediately that had been rejected by everyone. And I'm so delighted that they're published, but it takes a while. It takes exactly the right person that is in sync with your voice.
Yeah, it's the right person. Yeah. This is the other one, the Hippo in Our Yard, an early reader that Holiday House bought, and it's about a little girl. Again, this is a little girl. I decided now I had to do books about girls who saw animals like hippos and lions or tigers and zebras in her backyard, and nobody in her family believes her. The zoo had broken down, and they all got loose, so they were in her backyard.
It's a really wonderful story, and I think, Liza, I think you've always got such positive messages and hopeful messages in your book.
Nice colors.
Thank you. Yeah, I learned my colors by studying William Steig.
Mm.
Big fan of William Steig.
We are as well. We've got a great collection of his work here.
Yeah.
We have a really interesting question that came in from YouTube. Brian Bowes, who actually, I believe, teaches at Savannah College of Art and Design. He's a wonderful artist himself. And he asks, would the illustrators be willing to share their thoughts on how to keep from over-intellectualizing their work while creating? That's a real artist-to-artist question, I'm thinking.
I can safely say it's because I have a low intellect. And it's easy as could be. I don't intellectualize anything I do. I don't give that a moment's thought. I'll hand it over to the people, New Yorker cartoonists, who do.
Well, sometimes I've noticed when you have an idea or an assignment and you're maybe even on the phone listening to the pitch or the idea, or you can just sketch it out. And sometimes that very first sketch, which you do kind of intuitively and really fast, is the best.
Yeah.
And you'll think about it and you'll redo it, redo other ideas, and you keep coming back to that very first intuitive, spontaneous, done so fast you don't even have time to do it well. And a lot of times that's the best, the final idea.
I agree, Roxie. When you're trying to think of a cartoon, like for the New Yorker, sometimes your brain gets in the way. So you have to, that's why I have a big piece of paper on my desk or sketchbook, and I have words and doodles and stuff, and you just sort of sit there with them and let your mind wander, and hopefully it'll wander to an idea. But if you try to force it, it looks forced.
And doodles I was reading something actually in the New Yorker about boredom. They had this article, I think it was only on the web this week, about boredom. And it said how good doodling is because you're engaged, but you're not bored because you're doodling. And a lot of times that gives, with my maze books, I mean, all my doodles look like mazes. So, but just doing something intuitively, again, it's not intellectual, it's just fun.
I want to know how you guys come up with your children's book ideas. I don't really know how I did these two, but I don't know how to. It's not my main job, so it's sort of a mystery to me how to come up with a children's book idea.
I find the thinking part of the brain comes in later. The initial thrust, the initial inspiration, it doesn't come from that part of your brain. But then it's nice to be able to step back for the second phase and look at it critically, and then maybe make some intellectual critical choices about how you want to refine whatever you've done.
Yeah, first you get the idea, and then a lot of times you're like, you rethink it, and you're like, this is not going to work. But you can kind of make it work, and you kind of find out that that's the challenge, to kind of to pull it off, because sometimes you don't think you can. You know, all of a sudden you're like, well, I can't do this. I can't pull this off, but you can. It's kind of a elliptical thing.
Well, that was a wonderful question. And Liza, you kind of used the other side of your brain with your historical research into the history of the field, which has been very important to you. Do you want to say a little bit about Funny Ladies?
Yeah, back in 2000, yeah, I started writing this book, Funny Ladies, with Prometheus Books. And I mean, I started first. Yeah, no, they contracted me and then I wrote it. It's a history of the women cartoonists at the New Yorker from 1925 to 2005. So there were women in the first issue of the magazine, which I was happily surprised to find out. And I spent a year in the archives at the New York Public Library researching these women. This was before the internet was really easy to use. And so I just did a lot of going through manuscripts and letters. I loved it. It was great. So I was happy to discover these women and their work. And I'm gonna do I'm gonna do a new edition with Prometheus. It's coming out in next year. With all, because there's a whole bunch of new women now. Since I wrote this book, the New Yorker's had a lot more women cartoonists publishing their work, and I want to write about that. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you. Yeah. Before we get to Mark, we have another good question from YouTube, which is, what is the element of illustration that helps to make cartoons for children universal across race and ages? Anybody have a sense of what makes for children universal?
Well, there's the element of play and fantasy that all children care about and get engaged in.
Yeah. That doesn't have any race, and doesn't have any time attached to it.
And children are kind of universal in the way they play throughout the world. You know, American children are no different from children in the Philippines or children in China or anywhere else. They play with the same kinds of things and because playing helps you learn how to deal with the world, as you all probably know. Creates, helps you problem solve and resolve conflicts. Even animals play, as we know, like tigers. They learn to fight that way. So children learn, I think. And of course, fairy tales, as people believe, are a way to deal with the terrors of life. So that's, I mean, fables and that sort of thing, which can be very violent, are helpful in allowing children to deal with the evils and the complexities of life.
So Roxie, I feel I'm making a connection between what you just said and what cartoons for adults do for adults. They do the same thing. They, I guess, allow us to learn to cope with what's going on, like particularly now.
Yeah.
I think editors spend a lot more time thinking about that topic than illustrators and cartoonists. I think we don't give a lot of thought to that. We imagine that because we grew up loving imagery and we make imagery, that it automatically will be enjoyed by any age. I've never tried to gear it toward little kids or anything else, but editors step in and have very strong opinions about that and make the kind of changes that makes it difficult for the illustrator, but sometimes probably better for the project. So
when you're making your books, do you tend to have a child or a group of children in mind, or are you channeling your own inner child?
Inner child, for me. I'm the only child I ever had.
Well, these are great.
Mark.
One quick thing about making it universal. it's not a bad idea to use animals as your characters. That's, anybody can be an animal.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll say.
Good point.
In a good way or a bad way.
Mark, I wonder if you'd like to say a little bit about how you got into illustration and what direction you took.
Well, I kind of backed my way into illustration. Actually, I had studied architecture in college and then discovered that I liked painting way more than architecture. So I was a painter for about 8 years and then moved to New York City to paint and thought I'd make some money to live by illustrating. And I got some gigs at the Village Voice, which was, a great place to, to get little spot things to do. And I got a job with Milton Glaser, which was, most of you probably know who he is. He's sort of seminal designer, illustrator, just passed away, and kind of found my way into the illustration world that way, and found that I couldn't do illustration and paint at the same time because they were too closely connected. So I ended up just being an illustrator. What I liked about it was that painting was using one side of my brain, kind of almost like a non-thinking side, a very intuitive side. And I kind of enjoyed the illustration side because it used the other side, the kind of rational side, and the balance of the two felt good to me. So.
And you often, I think, use images and words in both your picture books and your illustrations. This might be an example. I wonder if you could say a little bit about what we're looking at.
Yes, okay. Well, this is essentially a comic strip, which is a medium I'm pretty comfortable with because I've been drawing little comics since I was a kid. This was done during the impeachment hearings. Remember those? It feels like another lifetime. But at the time, I was kind of fascinated by the quick cycling of excuses and explanations for what I considered basically treasonous behavior. And I just kind of made a note of all the different sorts of explanations that came and went. And I wrote them all down and then just put images with them that seemed to explain them. And like any good comic strip, it ended with the sort of the punchline. Which was
Mark, can I bother you just to read your captions just in case people...
okay, the first one, that little girl, I have no knowledge of this. And the second one, didn't happen. And the dog, what about the cat? With his hand in the cookie jar. Everyone does it. And the woman's going, get over it. With his foot on his desk. No big deal. And then finally the cat who ate the canary says, the Ukrainians did it.
When I first saw that one with "It Didn't Happen," which I love that one, I thought that was a dead dog on his feet.
So this image is an editorial illustration, and I should explain that an editorial illustration just means that it's an illustration done for a magazine or newspaper. And illustration to me is different. It's not the same as fine art. It's not of itself and for itself. It has a purpose and it has an agenda, and that's to communicate something, communicate an idea, a feeling, something specific to an audience. So, it has a job to do. When I get an illustration assignment, most of my career was doing editorial work. And the way that tends to work is the illustrator will get a text, a manuscript of an article or an essay, and read through it. And it's often, for me, they were often very complex and very dry. And I would read through it a few times and boil it down to one sentence, one concept, maybe a phrase or a sentence that encapsulated the main thrust of the article, and then find an image that expressed that as clearly and as simply as I could. And so this one was an article in a business magazine about some stocks behaving poorly, specifically alcohol and tobacco stocks. And they are known, sometimes they're known as the sin stocks. So that gave me the handle for this illustration.
Great.
What's the medium, Mark? What did you paint with?
This is digital. I mean, I used to work in watercolor. I used to be an oil painter in the day, and I used to work in watercolor, but now most publishers and magazines want files delivered digitally, and I thought I should just do them digitally instead of trying to like reproduce watercolor in digital format. So I've learned how to get textures and different effects in using digital media. I always start with pencil. I always start with a drawing, and then it goes from there.
That sure looks like tempera. Wow.
So these are also editorial illustrations. The same approach applies to this. The one on the left was an article about sorting and hierarchy, about data. Looking at most of the articles that I'm asked to illustrate are pretty dry. So this was about data sorting, and the way I approached it was thinking about when you're sorting something and creating a hierarchy. It's almost like a connoisseur, and I was thinking of a cigar connoisseur. So he's like rating and laying out whatever those things are into a kind of hierarchy. The one on the right was for a review of a newly released version of Strunken White's Elements of Style, which is sort of the Bible of writers. And the essential idea I got from that was that simple is better than complicated.
Great.
The one on the left is another editorial illustration, and it was about communication, which is actually the essential thing in illustration, but it was about miscommunication, about not understanding, maybe not speaking the right language or misunderstanding your audience. And either way, it felt to me like the idea of a round peg in a square hole communicated that idea as clearly as I could. Now, the one on the right was a poster, and it was done at the time of the family separations, when migrants would come to the border and kids would be separated from their parents. And I pretty much thought about this poster the same way, as what is the clearest expression of the horror of having child and parent separated. The words also came from my sensibility of this is my America, and this is done in my name. That's how that came about.
Yeah, it's amazing how emotional that work is, despite the fact that it's graphically very clear and simply done. But I'm sure it took you a long time to get to that point. It's kind of like poetry. Did you have a lot of other solutions to something like that?
I had other variations. I mean, I think it was important for me to make it anonymous and not have a caricature of the guy carrying the kid away. That it was, he's this nameless big guy separating a mother from her child. And I think I steered away from having like poor kids behind barbed wire, which, I think there were a lot of images like that around at the time. But for me, the thing that got me emotionally was that moment when your kid is taken away from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So leaving politics, onto book covers, I was given the opportunity to do covers for a series of books by P.G. Wodehouse, one of my favorite authors. He's a humorist writing in the 20s and 30s, and stylistically, I was trying to make the covers reflect that time period. He's best known, I think, for his Jeeves and Wooster books. So Bertie Wooster was this sort of hapless upper class Brit, not the brightest bulb on the tree. Jeeves was his butler, who was, very wise, all-knowing, and would always kind of rescue Bertie from whatever mess he got himself into. So that's Jeeves down in the right corner, and Bertie is in the green jacket. And this particular book, The Code of the Woosters, featured, this was done in the 30s, and it featured the head of Britain's fascist party. So I tried, when I made him, he's the guy, with jumping up and down. In the back of my mind, I was trying to make him graphically somehow relate, not too obviously, but to relate to a swastika, and the kind of angular graphics, I hope would do that. Plus he has a little Hitler mustache. So kids' books.
When did you begin your journey with children's books?
My wife and I were friends with an editor at Knopf, and she asked me to maybe do a kid's book, illustrated kids book, and that kind of got me started, and I found it really rewarding. It's a totally different time frame. The illustrations I was doing for editorial work were, you get the story on Monday, you need a sketch by Tuesday, and then you need a finish by Thursday. So it's, really quick turnaround. Kids' books take a year, I'm sure, as you guys know, take, maybe a year to come out. And I kind of like that leisureliness, and I also like I think because publishing doesn't pay as well as other forms of illustration, they compensate by treating you like an artist, and they give you a lot of freedom. That's pretty much how I got into it. But then I these days I'm doing a lot of children's books. That's sort of like my main thing.
Has that been everybody's experience, that children's books allow you a little bit more artistic legroom and freedom?
Well, one thing is that nowadays, with illustration no longer being used for fashion and in advertising very much, to me, the most creative illustrators working right now are in children's books, because there's really nowhere else they can go, other than maybe, and of course, cartooning has, as you guys know, there are less opportunities and less publications for cartooning. So I think there's very, very creative work being done in children's books. And again, as Marc said, the editors, they want you to do that. They encourage you to be eclectic and wild. And so it runs the gamut from super realism to absurd to all sorts of things. So there's some wonderful work in children's books.
Yeah.
For sure. Marc, what's this one about?
Well, before I get into that, I just have to say that the approach for me in a children's book is exactly the opposite from an editorial book. Editorial, you get a long article and you're winnowing it down, you're distilling it to its essence. A kid's book, you're often given text that is very minimal. Maybe a whole children's book is one page of text, and your job is to expand on it, to kind of bring more into it, bring a whole world into it, and also give kids who might want to read the book or have it read to them more than once, stuff to look at, on the second and third time of the reading. Now, this book is the third book in the series about this plucky young little snowplow, small Walt. Very charming, written by Elizabeth Verdick. And this particular book, he has rescues a puppy, a small dog that you can see on the cover. Right now, he's heading back to his lot after a day of plowing. And you can see all the big snow plows who, in the first book, they're, pretty disdainful of him, but he shows his worth and plows through. So,
Marc, do you have a favorite children's book that you've created? I know my kids grew up with your work, and
yes. And in fact, one of my books that I wrote is totally based, like the feel and the flow is based on this. I love Babar. I love the whole universe. I love the way it's told. It's something that really resonated with me. I mean, there are a lot. I love Harold and the Purple Crayon, and the Mike Mulligan stories. And my favorites are probably the ones I grew up with, and probably ones that were written in the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
This one has a very babar feeling. Bobo.
Bobo. So Bobo was a whole different experience. So normally you get a manuscript from the author if you hadn't written it yourself, and it's just a page of typewritten text. And the first thing that I would do is break it down into pages, because children's books are typically 32-ish pages long. So you look at the text and you figure out how the page breaks will go. What will be a 2-page spread, what will be a one, page turn here, what will be spot illustrations, and you break it down that way. Now this book, my wife wrote. She wrote all 3 of the Bobo books. I Must Have Bobo. This is I'll Save You, Bobo. And then there's Bobo the Sailor Man. Bobo was that sock monkey lying down there. And we worked on these together. We would go to a coffee shop and she would say a line of text and I would draw a picture as she was talking, and we would kind of go back and forth, and sometimes the picture would suggest a different turn to the story, or we would go back and forth like that. So I just had to say this is really a different, unusual way to do these books. This particular book, the hero, Willie, is making his own picture book about Bobo, and he's saying, Bobo, you'll have a scary adventure and I'll save you. Once upon a time, we were in a jungle. Everything was really big and green. So you can see what he's picturing in his mind, and then at the same time, he's drawing his own picture book.
Wonderful. Is there going to be another Bobo?
So far, no. I would love to. We had some in the wings, but we'll see. So this is the first book that I wrote and illustrated, and it was called Phooey. And it's basically a Rube Goldberg device. I know Elwood would certainly know about this. Maybe other people do. It starts with this young kid who you can see in the lower right-hand corner, kicks a can. He's so bored, he kicks a can, and it hits a cat in a tree, and it starts a whole series of events. One thing causes another, a chain of events that escalates, gets bigger and bigger and more chaotic. And you can see this in this spread. It's sort of midway through. Teacher got knocked down off her ladder, and the baker slips, and pies go out and hit people. And by the end of the book, the entire town is in chaos, and people are falling down, and everything is happening. And through it all, the boy is totally oblivious. He's still bored. He's walking through the whole town. His friend, this girl, shows up, and she's sort of the foil. She is the one who sees what's going on.
Well,
I like that bird looking at the stick. What is that bird thinking?
I'm trying to remember what it was about. I think I had an idea, and I'm not sure I can remember. I haven't looked at the book.
Maybe it was a wishbone.
Mark, I know you wrote this one yourself, but you've certainly worked with authors, and this might be a question for everybody, but have there been times, this came in from YouTube, when working on a children's book, that you have requested to have a written change based upon how your artwork turned out? Is that something you're able to do, to request a writing change?
Request a what? A written?
Change in the writing, yeah. A change to an author's word.
Oh, there was one. Oh God, I don't know if I can say this. It involved kind of a funny racial thing. It was one of the snowplow books, and they rescue one of the drivers who'd gone off the road, the snowplow and a tow truck, and the driver of that car that went off the road happened to be black. And when they bring him up, the original text said, "Free at last," and I thought, oh my God. So I wrote to the author and said, you have to change that to "Free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last." So, but it was better to just to have a different wording for that. But that was my only suggestion to change text.
And so is that what we received? Did the change happen?
Was that to me?
Oh, Elwood, please go right ahead.
Oh, no, I don't, to tell the truth, I can't remember the question.
No problem. Here's another beautiful spread.
Okay, moving on. I really made a mistake going there with that. So this was the other book that I have written, and it's called Archie and the Pirates, and it's kind of an adventure story. Archie is the monkey up in the top right corner. He's shipwrecked on an island, and he's kind of a combination of Robinson Crusoe and MacGyver. And he makes friends with a few of the animals, and together they defeat a band of pirates. And this is the last spread of the book, when all of the animals who worked together and decided that they would be great if they lived together in a town. So this is the town that they built.
Beautiful drawing.
Now back.
It's a different kind of children's book.
This is ostensibly a children's book, but obviously not really. It was written by Michael Ian Black. He's a really funny writer and performer. And the thing about this book was, it was presented to me by Simon & Schuster in early March of 2016, when Trump was just saying that he was going to run for president. And the publisher said, you've got to do this book really fast. It has to come out before the Republican convention, which was in July. So it was like just a few months away. Normally, as I had said before, books take a year or so to put together. You got to do this book in a month, because he's clearly not going to get the nomination, and then this book will be of no interest to anybody. So I did manage to get it done in the month, and sad to say that the book is still of interest to some people. The book was written very, very much like in the form of a Dr. Seuss book.
Did you design it, Mark?
It's
the graphic design on the cover?
No. There's the art director, Dan Potash from Simon & Schuster, is a fabulous designer. And we knew there was going to be some, image of him, and he came up with that.
It's wonderful. It really has the feel of one of those old books of the period. So.
Yeah.
He even distressed it, made it look distressed.
Mark, I back in the 2016 primaries, I was doing a lot of political cartoons and publishing them on Medium, and I was drawing all the candidates, but I would draw Trump, and I drew him in shorts, because I felt like he was a bully. And I often put him in a sandbox with the other GOP candidates. It was kind of fun to do that. I took away the short pants when he became president just out of respect for the office and giving him a chance. And I just recently brought the short pants back. So.
That's commentary in and of itself.
Liza, is this a way of asking indirectly how come Trump has no pants in this?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I don't know, Mark.
Well, I was trying to think of a way to show him that wasn't like a real, out-and-out caricature or Dr. Seussian looking, because the book was very much Dr. Seuss. I didn't want to make it too much. So I just kept thinking of him as kind of a rutabaga or sweet potato or something, with hair.
Well, all of your work is really wonderful, Mark, and I'm sure this one is still a hot ticket item for sure.
Is that digital, Mark? Is that also digital? It looks white.
It was drawn in pencil and shaded, in pencil, and then colored digitally. Yeah.
I love that it also has a Robert Osborne quality, those drawings, I thought.
Very much. Thank you, Mark. Wonderful. Roxie, I wonder if you could talk about your journey in illustration and how you got there.
Well, this, by the way, is one of my apps. That was one of my apps. I did this huge maze, 5 feet long, and it had 16 panels on it, and you went from panel to panel. And so this picture is that. I love doing mazes. So at the age of 6, I was first published because I won a prize for a drawing. And I'm like, this is fun in the newspaper, the local newspaper. So I've been an artist all my life. And I studied fine art, but I used to be a television courtroom artist in Washington, D.C., an editorial artist. And I started coming to New York to get freelance work and stopped in the New Yorker one day with a couple drawings, and they bought them like right then and there. And a couple years after that, I tried a cover idea, and I came up on the train and they bought the cover, and I was in Washington with a little house. I had an apartment. Oh, you have something I didn't realize. A dog and a car, and I gave all that up, moved to New York, didn't know one person. The day after they bought my first cover. So the New Yorker has been incredibly influential in my life. And the first cover is that one on the right there. Next slides. You can see where I get my tendency towards mazes.
Absolutely. A lot of architecture and perspective. So interesting.
A few years ago, I was working on a children's product, and these big, huge, almost stage set type things, and I did a maze. And then I thought, I wonder if I could do mazes in a book. And I got the idea to do a maze that would go from page to page to page. You would never leave the maze. Of course, you couldn't go up. It was very tricky because you only have one solution to it. So I did the book, and I came all the way to the end, but about 2/3 of the way through the book, I made a mistake in the book, right? And it turned me around. And I'm lying in bed that night, and in a dream, I literally dreamt that, wait a minute, I'll take that mistake, I'll put it in the back of the book so that you go all the way through the book from page to page to page. And then at the end, you're turned around and you come all the way back through the book to your starting point on a different maze. And this is also an ABC book. You search for, this is the drawing, so you don't see it, but there's little signs that say A, B, and then coming back, you would be at the Z. And this is there are letters in here that you may not be able to see. There's an F in the upper left, a V in the lower right, an E in the middle top. So there's an alphabet, and also you count and find things within this book. And this is called Mazescapes. This is the first of 6 maze books that I did, which I love to do. Next slide. So this actually is, so I started to, I'm known more for my nonfiction and concept books using gamification, which is kind of using game-like devices in non-traditional media. In other words, the book as object. I mean, it's not telling you how to play a game, it's the game. So they would be, I've done lift the flap books, mazes, guessing games, inside outside concepts, a lot of search and find, matching games. Oh, you can go back to that one for a second. Matching games, hidden objects. So this book is a nonfiction book because it talks about ecosystems. So 12 ecosystems, and it's a little harder. It's harder to do mazes based on real life because you have to adhere to rules. You can't just do a bunch of fantasy things, although in a minute we'll see some fantasy things. And this is a way to understand 12 different ecosystems. So you have a game where you start at one point and end at the other. You search and find for the things. And even when I'm doing this book, I like put myself into it, and I feel like I'm on the little teeny road. And when I was doing this, I also, by executing it, started to grasp my own, it teaches me about ecosystems. Like when I did tundra, I had to understand there are no trees there. There's just like little flowers and leaves. Pieces of grass. So it's very challenging, but it's exciting. For example, in a city, you'd think that would be a great maze, but walking on a sidewalk, you have to be very careful. You can't direct people because people could go either way. But on a road, you have lanes that are dictated. So there are various challenges to to making mazes in out of real life things. But you can go now.
Roxie, what medium do you use generally?
I use pen and ink. I do the whole thing. And by the way, in the back of the nonfiction books is an answer key. And so I do the black and white ink. So I don't know if you can see this. I do it in black and white ink, and then I scan the maze so that it can be used in the back either to find the answers. And then also I save it for children and put it on my web pages so that they can color them in. So it's an activity also. And so I use ink, and then I use colored inks to paint them. And I really love them because you can do, as you'll see, very, very strong colors. I use something like F&W acrylic inks, or very subtle colors. And if you use, I use primarily transparent. So the line shows through. And also if you put red and then you put blue, where they cross, it's like layers of glass, you'll find purple. So I found it a wonderful medium. So after just finished saying I do nonfiction, here we have my closest thing to fantasy. And here you come in on the left side and you work your way through the maze and you go out on the right side. And this is a series, I think I have 3 of them here, of 8 interconnected mazes, all on different ideas, but they flow from one to another. You see the yellow path on the left and then it exits on the right. So next, so this is after Escher. This is called Tunnel Town, and it was very challenging. You go upstairs, you go on an elevator, you go on a subway car, you go on a river down at the bottom, and you work your way through the maze. And again, Tunnel Town, and you can see it's not a tree house, it's the opposite because you see the roots of the trees. So next.
Roxie, do you get a lot of response from children who are trying to find their way through these things or having fun, kind of settling into the little spaces that you're painting? And
yes, and also my books have been chosen as the best books for boys often, because even though I'm a girl and I love mazes, and they say women are not as spatially oriented as men, I don't believe it because I'm a girl and I like mazes. But it's very good for, again, this was chosen as particularly good for boys because it gives them fun using a book, particularly the nonfiction books like Ecosystems. It's a sneaky way to have children get engaged and interested and learn things. And by the way, this maze, which you come in on at the A and you work your way around, I've developed an entire 32-page architectural book on this, which is quite challenging because if you think about a book, you can't open it top and bottom unless the whole book's constructed that way. So from left to right. So if I moved through the city, the whole city would be one long skinny city, right? Because you can't, if you move from page to page to page in a linear way. But I figured out a way where in several places by, let's say, having a green park and then it matches up with another, I created it so it's actually a regular, when you see it at the end, you can see that it's a regular city. It's not one long because in several transfer points, you work your way. It's hard to describe. It took a year to figure it out. Next. And this is my new book, just out. It came out, sadly enough, the very day, April 7th, that New York had its worst day of COVID. So not a good time to have a book come out, but it's called Dive In. Here's the cover. And this book has a huge, this is also a paper engineer book. It has a huge spread. Thank you, my dear Holiday House publishers. It has a huge spread in it. And in the end, you find out that you've been swimming, and you do this, I don't know if you can see this. You're working your way from page to page. Again, this is like a puzzle. The top, the sides, they all fit into each other. So the fish at the top, the fish on the right, for example, goes through 3 pages. So this is a game also. This is just out. And the next one is my new book, which hasn't even come out yet. about the rainforest. And again, you're taking a trip through the rainforest and every page leads into the next. And this does have some vertical connections. You'll see the tail of two golden tamarins hanging down, and above that was the their page, the monkey page. This is the iguana, and I love it that he looks so fierce. He's 6 feet long, but he actually is a vegetarian and he's a scaredy cat. He can run really fast and swim fast, but he's not vicious. He wouldn't hurt you. And then you've got him, and then you've got the little teeny ants down below who are also vegetarians. So each page has a rationale, and then the text. This is just, this book has not been printed yet, as I say. So this was given to the art director. This is just a scan of the book, and this comes out next year. So, so again, in these gamification books, as a children's literature scholar said a couple of years ago, she said, I use the book as object. So the book itself is a thing, and some more than others, but we knew they're all interactive right from the get-go, like the inside-outside books. When I looked back upon it later, I realized they had elements of surprise, interactivity, and page turn that starts to become a game. So that's what really interests me. And again, the challenge is to do it like I did a book, to do it with nonfiction. It's very easy to make fantasy things. Not easy, but easier. For instance, here's a book called Market Maze, where you start out, let's say in Montauk, you start out at the sea and you work your way through the mountains and you pick up apples and you pick up tomatoes, and then you get to the cornfields, and you work your way all through from page to page until you get to the city, and then you go to the green market. So this is teaching children where food comes from. And there's a guessing game, so each environment, like the apple environment, would also have other things like the animals that might live in that area. So again, it's teaching, but also playing games at the same time. And one more quick thing I wanted to say when we talked earlier about rejection. So I did one book, which is also a guessing book, called Masterpiece Mix a couple years ago for Holiday House. This book I had started in 1995 or something. An editor suggested I do a book on art. I did it. I did a dummy. She rejected it out of hand. I put it in my flat files for 12 years or more. And then I took the idea to Holiday House about 4 years ago, and they bought it. So you never know. This too has a game element. In the end, you have to find there are 37 paintings that are like hidden away within this. And of course, it teaches kids about art, genres of art. So again, that's my mantra, never give up.
Amazing work, and a great opportunity for interactivity for kids. We have a question that actually, Roxie, probably would be great for you to answer, but I think it could apply to everybody. The question is, do you conceptually come up with your own ideas, and also how long does it take to actually create the finished product?
Actually, I do have a thought on that. I always come up with my same ideas and my own ideas, and also one book will lead into another. You'll notice I did the rainforest in eco mazes, and now I'm doing a whole book on rainforest. Or you saw that ABC, I'm doing a whole book on that. So you often get one idea after the other. But also, the other part of second part of your question. I know what I was thinking. So with me, I'm what's called a visual thinker. So I actually do the drawings and the concept first to see if it works, and then I write the words, which my editors do not like. They want you to write the words first so that they can edit it and give it back to you, and then you can do the dummy or the sketches. So I have to train my editors, if possible, to let me do the art first, and then I write to the art. I don't do the art to the writing. I write to the art.
Roxie, we have another question from YouTube. Mark had mentioned that he, for his Trump book, he did it in a month, but generally it's a year or two for a book. How long do you spend on your books?
Well, if you don't count 12 years in the drawer, I spend about a year, about the same. Yeah. And then it's one more year before it comes out by the time they print it. And after, by that time, you've kind of forgotten you did it. Usually about a year.
I have a question. Roxie, are you good at mazes? Have you been in mazes, or do you draw mazes for yourself or figure out mazes?
Well, I actually doodle. We talked about doodling when I'm on the phone, like even, I'm not doing it now, but half the time when I'm listening to a webinar, I'm doodling. But as a child, I remember in our backyard, I think we were building something with bricks, like a patio or something, and I made a circular house with the bricks, which was a maze. But I don't particularly solve other people's mazes.
Ah.
So, I just like making them.
Roxie, thank you. It was really wonderful to learn more about these incredible books.
Really beautiful.
And Elwood, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started? You've got a great story behind your beginnings.
You mean with Nancy Find, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cartoonist school.
I didn't know I would talk about that, but my high school art teacher was Nancy Fine, and I had 2 years of high school with it. I didn't go to take art because I thought I would do, my father suggested I do drafting. I could make a living being a draftsman, back when they actually used pencils and all those things. And so I took drafting for 2 years. In the third year, I couldn't take drafting because my grades were too low. So they sent me down to take something else. And so I thought, I'll have to take art. And I didn't want to take it because I didn't like the art teacher. But I walked in the room and it was a new art teacher, had just come from New York City. Her name is Nancy Boyer Fine. And I would say she was my mentor. She was the person who I didn't know at the time that would turn my world around and introduce me to all kinds of other artists and Norman Rockwell and all the cartoonists I love. So I always have to say when I give a talk or something that I really owe her a great debt. And I stayed in touch with her over the years, dedicated 2 kids' books to her. And another of her students, Jean Ryman, and I were there 2 weeks before she died of cancer, visited her. So that's quite an aside, but something like that in your life. I got nurturing from my parents when I would draw a little Porky Pig or something that looked kind of like Porky Pig. But it wasn't until Nancy Fine that it enriched my life in so many ways that only later did I appreciate it as my life unfolded. So that was, she insisted that I leave Alpena, Michigan, my hometown, and go to art school once I graduated, and found a school in Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, which was a mediocre school.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a place to spend 2 years and learn a few things. And then I went out, and after that, it's pretty much self-taught, just art director for 8 years. And then I started illustration full-time in the 70s. Or I so lose track of time. Maybe it was.
So this is a fairly early piece. Do you want to say a little bit about this?
Yeah, I never had the gift of a style. I wasn't, a lot of younger artists, you see their work when they first start in the biz, and that style is kind of their style. It may morph a bit. And I struggled with all kinds of things. I love Seymour Quast and Arlo Blackman. And there were so many influences, Alan Colbert. So I would try aping these people, but I'm not very skilled at that. And it was a blessing, I guess, because I never could, but I couldn't find my footing until I remembered the things I grew up with in the Detroit Free Press, which were like Barney Google. And I mean, I was born in 41, so you can sort of, I grew up with the comics of the 40s and the Saturday Evening Post of the 40s and on through the 50s. And so I came up with, this is that style that I came up with after I moved to Manhattan in 1976. Around 77, I discovered, in a way, my roots. And I started studying the artists, Martin Jeff, and these people that drew in a certain way that I loved. And I tried to figure out what they did with their pens to make that magic happen. Mm-hmm. And so this, I'm pointing over here because that's where my image is, but this is one of those. And I was never known as a real graphic kind of person. I always had a lot of stuff going on, but this, I think, was the first cover I did, and it's the Chicago Tribune. I even wrote down here the date on it. Let's see, it's kind of dark in here. You probably can't even see me. 1983. So I did this cover, and at the time, my late wife and I had Scotties. So I'm with the Scotty there, and I'm reading The Hound of the Baskervilles, and down there's a canine mutiny. But I would write these, create these little stories. And this was a cover that led to me doing a whole bunch of covers for a while. I've never done a lot of covers, but I started doing it for Detroit Free Press, and West Magazine did some nice things for them. I like doing, like Way Out West. I created a musical and put it on locally in Rhinebeck. And it was called Grumpy Lou and His Kazoo, and I wrote all the songs. And Maggie Picard, my late wife, wrote the book, did the story for it, and had the band that Stephanie knows, the Polecats. I don't think they were known as the Polecats then, but that was we made the music. We had work projected with an old-fashioned projector, and that was loads of fun. And I love doing little posters like that when I'm the art director. It's so much fun with no one making changes. That one is a greeting card. Oops, on the right, a greeting card. And I've done greeting cards for several greeting card companies, and they never sold very well. But for the company I did these for, I really think I did some nice ones.
Gravity doesn't exist.
Yeah, this is something that I love working on. This was who was Dennis Overby, does the New York Times science section, and he loved my work. He recommended me to the art director, and so I did quite a few for him, both individual spots and some of these larger pieces. This is one of my real favorites, and the story is just basically about people who have an idea that gravity doesn't exist. I mean, that it, not as we know it, you know, how there are these strange things that happen. And so it was fun to have gravity not working and manage to keep him on the ground because he has a newspaper. Anyway, I love these kind of drawings where I take all my favorite things I like to draw, because there are lots of things I don't draw well and don't like drawing. I'm just limited in what I like, but like shopping bags I like, and guitars. And
Elwood, I want to interrupt you for a sec because there's an amazing question from YouTube, which maybe will make you a little less self-effacing. A very popular, iconic Nickelodeon style in some of your work. Who influenced who?
Oh,
So,
who's the other who?
Well, actually, we could elevate. No,
I was, as I said, I was influenced by the early cartoonists.
yeah.
Some people have said my work feels like R. Crumb, but I was not a fan of his until later. So I didn't like his work. I didn't follow his work. So he and I drew from the same well, you know.
And I think this viewer is suggesting that sort of modern Nickelodeon looks a lot like some of your work. So the flow continues.
If it's modern, then they're copying me.
Yes, exactly. That's the idea.
This was for, the one on the left was for Fred Woodward, I think of West Magazine. I can't remember if that's what it was, but it was about the Texas Navy. And I just thought it was funny. I mean, Texas does have coasts, but the idea that the Navy would be plowing through a desert kind of theme. And the one on the right was for a magazine, and I couldn't find which magazine it was in my stuff to look it up. But it was loads of fun because I got to write, and accompanying each one of these is a make-believe thing. Like I would read about a real inventor or someone, and then I would create my own scenario for it, and it would have type under it, and that's a Da Vinci device of some kind that I created, looking at some of the things Da Vinci did, of course. anyway, it was, that's a pope of some kind up there. And it was, I really love, this is certain works of mine, I just love looking at them. I think they're just so good. It's almost like someone else did it. A lot of my work, it looks like someone else that did it, whose work I don't like. I like these. On the left is, I started embracing Photoshop and adding, I didn't draw digitally, but I would draw manually like that woman is drawn in my line with my normal pens in just line. And then I would scan it and bring it in. And I would bring in watercolor swatches from my little splash thing off to the side. I would bring that in like on her dress. And then find images, either copyright free ones, or I would sometimes buy the rights to certain images. And I did a number of pieces like that. And I'm very pleased with the way they turn out. They had a more graphic look. And the one on the right is, it's on some of our mugs around the house when I don't think I have one right now, when I have coffee. I just did some things I like. I've always had cats in my life since, almost my entire life. And they sometimes give you that look when you don't get up in time.
And in case people can't see it, the title is The Late Breakfast.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And so, Elwood, how did you move into picture books?
I started off when I first got to Manhattan in '76. I took my portfolio to everyone who would look at it. And in those days, people looked at it. Some of the people warned me in the Midwest that the art directors would chew you up. New York art directors. It's a rough town. I never met such wonderful, embracing people as the art directors and some of the editors. When I went to City, they would get their Rolodex. If they couldn't use me, they'd give me names of other people. It was great. But I went to a number of publishers of kids' books, and almost everybody liked my portfolio, which was an actual old-fashioned portfolio with 12 matted pieces in it. And so I didn't get any work. So I started doing just editorial work for all the magazines and newspapers, and a fair amount of advertising at the time. Then as those things started diminishing because of the times were changing, I got offers to do kids' books. And so for a long time, I illustrated other people who wrote, like Susan Goodman on this one. She did both of these books. The Truth About Poop is the first one. And it was really, it was quite a bit of fun because she's a good writer and she's funny and she did good research. So it wasn't a scatological kind of book. It was factual, but she had humor. And then I could augment it with whatever I did. So, yeah, anyway, so that's how I got into doing it. It just became what was available, and I had mixed feelings about it. I like doing them, but I've always been protective and hate making changes, and editors make changes. That's their job, is to get it as they think is right. And they don't like stubborn people like me that think, I always thought I was doing it right. That stalling book is nice, and that's all done hand-drawn, but brought into Photoshop and then put together with that. I could get more graphic with that than I could when I did the more manual drawing in the old days, I think.
Elwood, you raise an interesting question, which might apply to everybody, I'm assuming. How hard is it to have to make changes that are suggested by an editor that you wouldn't necessarily agree with? It really,
I'll just answer that for me, it's because I'm stubborn, and I know other illustrators and designers who make changes easily. They're more generous, and they're more, I think, open, and they're just not as protective. They see it as something they're doing for the good of the book. It's like musicians, they say, when you play guitar, you play for the song, you don't overplay. And I never could find the way. All the years I was in the business, I was always struggling um, to get it my way and having to give in. And I don't know. I don't want to talk about it too much because it makes it seem like I was a malcontent. I'm kind of not. I don't think, but and I look at my body of work and there's some really nice stuff in there. But the stuff I'm doing now is when I'm happiest. So
I'd like to quickly say that for me, it depends totally on the art director and the type of changes. There are art directors that I did some work with Art Spiegelman with the art director, and what he said, I just said, yeah, okay. I mean, when you sense that they know what they're doing and it could improve it, I'm totally willing. And then the other ones are kind of dumb or useless changes. It's like I'll fight to keep what I did.
Yeah, and if they're kind of sweethearts about it, they're really nice, and that they're softening you up, but you can't help but love it, and so that makes it easier too. Yeah.
Elwood, you did some work for the Klutz collection.
The what?
The collection of
Yeah, that was something that actually my partner Janice was saying, oh, don't forget about the Klutz books, which I almost had kind of forgotten about because I haven't done anything for them for so long. But in the early days, and I wrote down here a name that I wanted to mention because it's just like one of those sort of important things. Let's see, it was. I actually forgotten the people because it's been so long, but I did a lot of books for them, like this jump rope book, and they were ideal clients. In the early days, it was John Cassidy who created that juggling book with those soft juggling things, and it had a bag attached, and that was his first book, and then he got the company going, and not long after he started, I just read, because the art director we worked with was Mary Ellen Podgorski. And they both were ideal people to work with. They gave me a lot of freedom, and when something didn't work, they let me know in a way that seemed to work for me. Something like the jump rope book, I got to design the whole thing. With probably, Mary Ellen probably came in and changed sizes of things. But anyway, that was really a delight. And I had a good run with them for a long time. And then someone bought them out, a big company bought them out. They changed art director. Oh, and Mary Ellen sadly died quite young of cancer. And so we lost her. Then they changed everything around. John Cassidy sold the business. And they only used me a couple times after that. And I kind of didn't want to work with them anyway, because it was just so much fun in those early days. That was a great client, I'll say.
It's probably fairly typical that maybe when an editor or art director, you're associated with changes, that can change the relationship with the company too.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone here that's worked over a prolonged period will, you have your favorites and people that sometimes you have a long-term relationship with. And this one is finally my book, and that's one that sat in drawers, so like Roxie, where they just didn't go anywhere. And occasionally we'd bring them out and dust them off and send them to someone who seemed interested in something. And finally, it got sold by who? It's Creative Company. And Rita Marshall's the art director. She's married to Etienne Delaserre, if anybody knows his absolutely fabulous work. He's so original. And Tom Peterson is the publisher. And Tom actually, Rita showed the dummy of my book to him, this book, or actually it was a different one. And he said, yeah, let's go with it. And then this book. So it was fun. And of course did the thing with the Norman Rockwell Museum and this. I did a drawing class, very loosey-goosey. I'd like to try it again. Maybe I could even approach it differently.
We've got some good questions. Thank you, Elwood. It's incredible to see your wonderful work. Thank you. And we've got some interesting questions from our audience. From Brian Bowes, a few folks have talked about bouncing between media, particularly digital and traditional. What are some of the benefits and or pitfalls of that back and forth? Anybody have a thought on that?
Well, it's a lot easier to make changes in digital media than watercolors.
Right. So it's the difference between being able to change something or having to start over again.
Right.
Yeah. At the very tail end, we maybe don't have time, but I had a couple of my newer pieces if we could glance
Yeah,
at
I'm
them.
going to get right to that. So these are things that you're actually doing just for yourself.
Yeah, this is the stuff, and you can see that it's informed by my whole body of work over the years, but I'm stretching and trying to get into, it's my personal art, and I think it's the best work I've ever done. And one could argue that my career is based on being an illustrator, but this is where I do whatever I want with no editorial input, and explore and try to stretch, and it's a great joy to do at the tail end of my career and life. Anyway.
Elwood, I know you've been developing a program that gets other people to draw based upon using simple shapes.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, well, that's the one How to Draw with Your Funny Bone. I was leaning on that a bit, but I would like to revisit that sometime via the Rockwell Museum the idea was that everybody drew, all of us, whether we turned out to be artists or not, we all drew when we were little kids. We got down on our hands and knees and we made pictures that were all somewhat similar. And then as we got older, we started giving over that joy to people who could draw something that looked like a thing, or they would draw Superman that looked like Superman. And it always seemed wrong to me that as people get toward retirement age or whatever, they take a watercolor class or something. And I'm not putting down watercolor classes or anything, but they try it and it's hard to do right. And I would like sometime to find a way to encourage them to make pictures. I mean, I have skills, so I've developed skills like this, but if they could draw like they did when they were little kids, some of that's the best art I've ever seen. It's what little kids do. So anyway.
That's a great work. Thank you for sharing your work, Elwood. We're just going to close with a couple more questions, and maybe I'll invite everybody to jump in on maybe one or the other that might be of interest to you. So we have two questions. One is, how would you advise young artists who are coming into the field at this stage? And then, are there things that you're working on now that you are excited about and might want to mention? Anybody want to take one of those questions?
Yeah, I'd love to show what I'm doing now, actually. In terms of illustration, I'm doing a postcard for the kids from Florida who did the gun control stuff. And there's a series of postcards that various illustrators are going to do based on massacres, gun massacres. So this is from Indiana. There's a famous horrifying massacre, and they're taking those traditional postcards and
Wow.
using the inside of the letter, the way they did those things.
Yeah, I love it. I love those with those.
Like a little comic strip of the massacre.
Yeah.
Something hasn't happened yet, but this is a printout of this last one.
How will they be circulated, Mark?
I think in October, so they're going to come out, and they're I think they're going to be sent to people in Congress to try to get them to stand up to the NRA.
Great. Are you in conversation with those amazing young people as part of this? Is that
not well, just the person who's organizing this.
Mm-hmm.
But I would love to be. Yeah.
Really fun.
I'll share. It's show and tell. It's kind of fun. As Stephanie mentioned, every day at 5 on Instagram's TV. I started this during the pandemic in March. I started live drawing at 5, and I put this device over my hand, and I just draw for the camera. I talk to the camera first, and I talk to the audience. And then I draw for them, and I'm not drawing anything particular necessarily. Sometimes it's just doodling or talking about what's going on, drawing the healthcare workers and the people on the front lines, and talking about how we're struggling with it. Just no script, no nothing. And then I did Black Lives Matter. And then now I'm still doing it every day at 5 for Instagram. And today I drew the Jacob Blake who was shot in Milwaukee. And I'm
That's
also
beautiful.
thank you. Also experimenting with materials, and people like to see me experiment. They like to see, like, this is a Japanese brush I just discovered I had, and I love the way it works with the ink. So that's all on paper pretty much. And then I do digital drawings, like live drawing, like the convention tonight and the convention last week. So I do those and put them on Twitter. So for me, it's a new way to interact with my audience. And right now I'm not getting any money for this, but that's okay. It's a way to get my name out there and get my work out there and talk to people and share.
Thank you.
I love
Well,
that.
I'm doing a series of oil paintings, a little bit based upon the city. During the coronavirus in New York, the streets were kind of empty for a long time, and you'd see a solitary person walking by. So I'm doing a series of oils, and I paint around the corners, which kind of works with architecture. So here's a single person. So I've done a series of 9 of these, very more graphic than my usual things.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Are they intended for exhibition, Roxie, or for publication?
Yeah, they go to either gallery, several galleries, but the main one is up in Provincetown, and I'm trying to dry the oil off because the oil takes so long, and I'll be shipping them out in a couple by the middle of next week for Labor Day weekend.
Great.
So you can see they're all lined up over there, kind of trying to dry. I have a fan. I'm fanning.
So you all have done amazing work and incredible careers, and we look forward to seeing next steps and all the projects you continue to do. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been wonderful
Thank you for
hear
having
your
us.
work, and we thank our audience for being part of it and coming up with such great questions. We will look forward to seeing you again soon. We actually have another wonderful program next Tuesday at 5:30 with 4 female cartoonists. And Liza, I wondered, do you want to say a little bit about that for just
Oh, sure. Next Tuesday, we have a panel of cartoonists who are women for the New Yorker. It'll be Roz Chast, Victoria Roberts, Emily Hopkins, Emily Richards Hopkins, and Sarah Lautman. So it's a diverse group of people, diverse styles, and we're going to talk about our work and talk about what it's like to be a woman in a field that's been historically dominated by guys. What is that about? So
it'll be a fun conversation.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all for your extraordinary contributions to the lives of children.
Oh, thank you, Mary.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for
Big panel.
inviting us.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everybody. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you, Mark.